This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes three-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling four things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How Are the podcast as you join us the morning after Sunderland once again come back from behind at the Stadium of Light. And this time it ended in a 2-1 win against a well-organised Crystal Palace side who, to be fair to them, were well up for the fight. It was through a cool finish from Enzo Lafay and a cracking striker's goal from Brian Brobbey that we took all 3 points and moved up to 8th in the table, just 3 points behind a Champions League place. And it's a strange feeling that avoiding defeat in the Premier League is becoming almost routine as the lads are still unbeaten at home and only Arsenal and Aston Villa have lost fewer games than us this season in total. And only Arsenal and Manchester City have conceded fewer goals this season, which isn't a bad kind of set of teams to be around in that respect. But to go back through all of the action from yesterday's game and to help us put it into perspective, I have a couple of gentlemen to help me. And first up, we have a familiar voice from down under, which is, of course, our very own Martin Mundle. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, it was nice to get back to winning ways, wasn't it? It's been a little while that we've had to wait for another win after the win against the visitors, so it was nice to get another 3 points on the board, wasn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it though, does it? Because we've been playing so well, it doesn't feel like it's, when we go on these runs and we're waiting for a win, it feels like it, but we weren't kind of desperate for the win because it didn't feel that way.
No, and look, you've had some almost moral victories along the way, haven't we? We've had that draw against Man City. We've got a good point away at Tottenham. We've got the Everton penalty shootout win, of course. But it's just nice to get another 3 points on the board. And obviously, we've survived that AFCON period. And you know what? It's like you had all the build-up this week, didn't you? All the trouble that's going on at Crystal Palace. They had the FA Cup defeat last weekend against Macclesfield. And you just think, I've seen this movie before. I know which way this is going. And, a few seasons ago, we could have predicted the outcome of the game yesterday with some certainty, couldn't you? But I was very pleased that we managed to negotiate and navigate that one and get all 3 points.
Yeah. It's like a Jason Statham movie, mate. You can get the plot from the first couple of minutes, yeah?
Something like that.
Well, I was going to say, actually, this means I've been on with you and Gav this week. Which is kind of a rare thing. And it just needs the three of us to be on at some point, doesn't it?
Yes, the stars might align at one point soon, mightn't they? But no, it's difficult, isn't it, when we're putting out daily podcasts. And usually, I know Johnny did a sterling job during the week of filling in. But usually it's either you, me, or Gav who's hosting, isn't it? So it's very rare that we get the opportunity to get two of us on, never mind three of us. But it'll happen soon, mate. It'll happen soon.
That's it. We'll get one of the landmarks. But anyway, because also with us today is a good friend of the podcast and someone who we always love to hear from. So we're very pleased to welcome Kieron Brady. Hello, Kieron.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Martin. And, of course, good morning to all the listeners.
Yeah, well, I was looking out for you on the coverage. Didn't normally see you in your camp on the phone or something like that. Were you at the Stadium of Light yesterday?
I was working for the Premier League as I do, and it was in many ways symptomatic of what we've come to expect from Sunderland this season. It was resilient. There was character, fitness, energy, discipline. No sense of panic, despite the fact that they went a goal behind. And it was really just another demonstration of all of the hallmarks that have characterised what has been such a successful season to date.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, just quickly, Kieron, before we come on to the game and get into the action, just a couple of things I wanted to kind of raise with you because I wanted to mention an article that you wrote for the Roker Report website, and it went out on January the 6th, and we can kind of maybe put links to it as well through this pod as well. But it was titled A Tale of Two Captains, the International Brigade, and you talked about Rach Carter and of course how important he is to Sunderland, of course with the mural and all of that. But you wanted to highlight a couple of other people in terms of the history of Sunderland in that article.
Yes, the International Brigade were a group of people who had came together to fight against Franco and fascism in the mid-1930s. And unfortunately, many of them died as a result. Many of them had made a decision to, give their lives because they were very fearful of what this relatively new political phenomenon may impact upon in terms of the people of Spain directly, but obviously how it might flourish beyond Iberian borders. And there was a very strong, significant local contingent from both Sunderland and surrounding areas. And upon doing some further research, with the help of many others, not least the Sunderland Antiquarian Society, it became evident that there was a link between at least some of those who had volunteered to go to Spain and the football club, insofar as when Sunderland reached the FA Cup final in 1937, many of the volunteers who were crossing the seas to go to Spain actually took time out to listen to the radio broadcast of the 1937 FA Cup final, where Sunderland, led by Rage Carter, had managed to beat Preston North End after overcoming Millwall in the semi-final. And I just thought that that was quite fitting insofar as referring to the two captains, because Captain Frederick Robinson was a Sunderland supporter. And despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, he felt there was an immediate priority on board to try and make sure that his favourite football team could come back from London for the first time with the FA Cup. And fortunately, that was to transpire. But I think in a more serious note, it really should hopefully give the opportunity for the people of Sunderland to learn a little bit more about their history and, to cherish the memory of the people who were prepared to, they weren't conscripted, they weren't under any significant order or command. It was something that was entirely voluntary to go to Spain and to put their lives at risk in order to combat the evils of fascism. So, to that end, Solidarity Park are doing wonderful work to try and ensure that at some point in the not too distant future, there may be some form of monument and memorial to commemorate the local people who went and were willing to, and did, in some respects, give their lives for the Spanish people.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, just for the context today, we did come back from behind in that FA Cup final. I thought I'd just throw that one out there against Preston. But it is important to remember people like that, especially when you look at the contrast in terms of two people from Sunderland who one was winning the FA Cup and the other one was listening to him from afar doing things like this. But it is important that these sort of things are remembered, Kieron. But is there a way people can kind of get involved and or get to know more about it?
There is. I mean, I suppose the most immediate thing that people could do is to go on to solidaritypark.com, and that will give you information in greater detail about how people can get involved. We fortunately do have a number of organisations and people, students, etc., who are involved at this moment. But bearing in mind that this is intended to be a memorial and a monument for all the city, for all its citizens, for people to learn from, then it would be wonderful to have the involvement of people in everyday life. It's, there's no sort of barriers in terms of who can get involved. So that information can be found at solidaritypark.com. And I suppose I wouldn't like to say that Sunderland would potentially be arriving somewhat belatedly to the party, but it is worth pointing out that there are monuments and memorials to the International Brigade in various towns and cities across England, Scotland, and certainly in Ireland. But equally, there's a reverence attached to the International Brigade in Spain itself. And it seems a little bit hard to fathom that you have people like Captain Frederick Robinson and others, both celebrated and commemorated in various plazas and plaques across Spain. But yet, in their home city, we seem to be lagging behind a little in ensuring that the local people here are fully aware of just how heroic some of their past citizens have been.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, Martin, in terms of very specifically the International Brigade, I mean, it's very important to kind of call out from a local point of view those people who volunteered for a cause like that. But I mean, just in general, of course, you're an exile like myself, and I'm always banging on to my kids about people from Sunderland. Every time we go to London, I mention Jack Crawford and the monument to him in Mowbray Park and all that. But it is important. I mean, we do on this days and on this weeks about the history of the club, but in terms of the city and the kind of the people who did, huge things, especially when they volunteered, like what Kieron's talking about, it is important to kind of mark it in some way, isn't it?
Oh, it's hugely important. I think, when you talk about Sunderland specifically, you've got so much that makes up the rich tapestry of what's gone on over the past. And, I love hearing about these sorts of stories because, they're not something I'm necessarily aware of before. And as I say, we do the On This Week podcasts with, yourself occasionally, Chris, and Kelvin and Andrew. And, we, typically delve into different bits and pieces of Sunderland history, some of the stuff that's very well known, and a lot of the time, some of the more obscure stuff that people don't necessarily know about. And I just kind of love all of that stuff that goes on around the periphery and learning more about it because, there's an awful lot to learn and to gain from understanding more about the past. And I don't think you can ever understand too much. So, your article is brilliant, Kieron. I loved reading it, and
Thank you.
we'll include the link to Kieron's article in the show notes and stuff. So if you're listening to this, either on the website or in the show notes on the podcast app, you'll be able to find the link to the article. But yeah, it's fantastic, and hopefully we'll be able to have a sort of deeper dive into all of this stuff with you, Kieron, over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the kind comments, Martin. And I suppose it's worth adding that in addition to the notion of going to combat and challenge the rise of fascism in Spain, a microcosm of that in many respects is the productivity that can come from unity across borders. The International Brigade were not uniquely from these islands. There was people from different parts of the world. And of course, it's an international brigade that people are going to watch every second Saturday at the Stadium of Light, because you only have to look at the cosmopolitan and multicultural nature of the Sunderland squad at this moment to realise just how beneficial it can be to bring skill sets and contributions from people of all colours, classes, creeds, etc. So it does have some sort of, with a little bit of artistic creativity, you can sort of make the case for an international brigade at the Stadium of Light.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, like I said, I'll second what Martin said. Absolutely fantastic article. And like I said, we'll put the details out and the information for this podcast. And like I said, that article went out on the 6th of January. But I've never had to pivot from the rise of fascism in Spain back to the football. But I will try my best to do that. Because, I mean, again, just before we get into the game in hand, if we ever need it to, we'll just boost your credentials a little bit more, Kieron, because of course, the last time Sunderland beat Crystal Palace in the top flight, and it was 2-1. This one was at Roker Park in 1991. But you more than played your part in that game. You kind of ran Crystal Palace ragged alongside David Rush up front. You both got a goal each. This time it was the other way around, where Crystal Palace equalised. But we winners 2-1 that day.
We did. And I mean, that game has particularly happy memories for me, and not simply because we're playing against a very, very good Crystal Palace side. They finished third behind Liverpool and Arsenal that season. And from memory, we took to the field with 4 19-year-olds. You know, something that I think would be unheard of today. And, you know, that it was myself, Rushy, Brian Atkinson, Dave, and Anthony Smith. Dickie Ord was playing, who I think might have been 20 or 21. So we had a very, very young team playing against one of the best teams in England at that time. And we managed to prevail on the day. And I suppose if that wasn't good enough for any Sunderland fan, then Palace's solitary goal was scored by a certain Aaron Pardew. So by extension, in a sense, we were putting the visitors to the sword, which I like as a term, I must admit. I know it's became something of a recent phenomenon. So yeah, it was a great win and great memories. And it's obviously far too long a record to survive until yesterday.
Well, that's it. Well, I think that was had something to do with Crystal Palace maybe not being in the top flight as much as we haven't been.
Yeah, of course, I know that.
Over the years. We'll let them take their share of the blame for that. But I don't know about you, Martin, but I was in the Fulwell end that day, and I thought with all those young players, I thought, oh, we've cracked it here. We're going places with all these, as Kieron said, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds that thought we were flying.
Yeah, no, I was there. I was up in the main stand seats up near the Roker end where they used to stamp the feet on the wooden floors to "We Will Rock You" when the teams came out and stuff like that. But I, as Kieron said, there was a lot of young players in the team that day, wasn't there? And Marco had a spell out injured, and I think Peter Davenport had a spell out injured and was maybe just coming back for this game. And I remember coming out of this game thinking, right, we're staying up. We are definitely staying up because we've just got this run happening. And like as you say, Palace's team, you had Brighton right up front, didn't you? Unbelievably good strike force. You had people like Eric Young and Andy Thorne and people like that in defence. Nigel Martin in goal. It was a star-studded team that got to the FA Cup final. Was it the season before they got to the cup final? Excellent team. And that was one of those days that gives you an awful lot of hope and confidence. And it didn't work out completely that season, did it? But no, it was one of the highlights.
A false dawn, as you're more than accustomed to over the years.
I think didn't we play Palace around Christmas and David Rush had scored? It might be his first goal.
Yeah, no, Rushy had actually scored against them down at Selhurst Park.
Yeah,
that season where
I think we were
on the wrong side of a 2-1 scoreline that day.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm sure Andy Thorne was a mag as well, wasn't he? From memory?
He was.
Yeah. So
briefly,
that's it. But
only briefly.
There you go. I mean, if I hadn't brought up Alan Pardew, I'm pretty certain it would have been in your memory bank.
Yeah, and just out of interest, Paul Borden and Eddie McGoldrick was on the bench. So it was a strong bench. I remember those two being good players. But it's not like us Martin, is it, to get lost down memory lane of something like this, is it? So,
no, it's very, very easy to do, isn't it?
That's it. We'll get back to the modern day. So anyway, we'll get back into this Palace game yesterday, and we'll get straight into the team because people returning from AFCON and people returning from injury as well. There was Ballard, Alderete, and I'm trying to think, Ronaldo and Brobbey who came into the side. Sirkin, O'Nien, Adingra and Mayenda came out, Martin. Any surprises for you in that starting 11?
Not massively. The only thing I thought he might do, I did think he might chuck Mayenda on the right-hand side. I thought it might have just been a little bit more brave attacking-wise. I thought he might want to take the game to Palace a bit, but of course, if you play Trai Hume, and it's a funny formation, isn't it, when Hume plays there, because sometimes it's a 5, sometimes it's 4 with Hume pushing up, sometimes he comes in centre midfield. I thought Trai Hume did excellently yesterday, whatever position he was playing in. But I think you can kind of see the makings of what he thinks is his first choice 11. Obviously, Ronaldo was fantastic. He came back in at left back. It's going to be really interesting next week when Diarra is back. Diarra's back. See what he does with Lefay and stuff like that. But no massive surprises. I think when you've got Mukiele, Ballard, Alderete and Ronaldo all fit, I reckon that's the basis of your defence, and then you can kind of move people around alongside him. Siddiqui obviously came back in Everton, which was a little bit of a surprise, and I thought he was fantastic at Everton. And again, yesterday, he just kind of showed what we've been missing a little bit over the past few weeks. I think the biggest loss out of AFCON's obviously been Traore, hasn't it, who's come back with an injury for 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll see how that transpires. But whether he would have played if he had been fit, I don't know, because I think the Brist seems to like him. But yeah, look, I think Mundle was probably the one that surprised most people, because obviously there's a few contenders to play out there, isn't there? But I did think he would play, because I thought while he's been raw and he hasn't looked as if he's got like everything together, I think he's got loads of potential, and I think he offers a goal threat. So I think he kind of chucked Mundle in as a bit of a wild card, and I thought he did pretty well.
Yeah. Well, whenever a team sheet comes out like this, Kieron, the initial debate is always about the system, about whether it's 4 or 5. And to be honest, even when you start watching them, it's actually tough to decide, because in different scenarios, they take up different shapes. What do you make of this kind of fluid shape that we've got, where Trai Hume kind of just slots in wherever he deems where the danger is, or where he needs to be from an attacking sense or a defending sense, but he seems to just go where he's needed?
Yes, and it's not something that's as novel as people would actually think. I mean, I can understand the logic at times of playing someone who's accustomed to defending a little bit further forward, because whoever is playing as a fullback, for example, would have that advantage in knowing that the person in front of them does have very good defensive instincts. You know, even if you go back to my time playing, Paul McGrath often played for Ireland in front of the central defenders, and that was designed to give them that sense of security, that the person in front of them wasn't a traditional midfielder. It was someone that would know their job, someone that would understand the difficulties. So having Trai Hume playing, you know, somewhere between defending and midfield, let's say, is something that would be reassuring for a back four. And I thought he performed very, very well yesterday. He might not dribble in the way that you would expect a wide player to do so, but he was a threat going forward. I think he was unlucky with a header, but it's partway through was it the second half? Yeah, and you know, so I can understand why Regis Lebris might have came to the conclusion that if anybody's going to be a jack of all trades in many respects, it may well be Trai Hume, because I think he's got an outstanding temperament. I wouldn't foresee any difficulties in asking him to fulfill any role or responsibility within the team. And I think that having him in those positions doesn't really impact in an adverse way on the people who might be alongside him. So to that end, you know, it's been successful. But it's just one small successful story, and you know, in a litany of what we've come to expect this season.
Yeah, that's it. Just very quickly on that lineup, Martin. Do you think the fact that, you know, and you know, that Mundle's in there, that obviously it shows that we've got a lot of faith in them? And I think there was a couple of stories that came out that, you know, almost that, you know, Mundle paid the price for trying to get fit for that playoff campaign, that he was playing through, you know, the pain barrier, and he was clearly injured during that, but we kind of tried to rush him back for it. But also with the influence of the transfer window, that we're putting him in there because we maybe want Mundle to stay, and it's kind of that, you know, it's that reassurance to say, look, you will get first team minutes again.
I think it's a really funny one, isn't it? Because, you know, obviously he came into the side early on last season when Jack Clark left for Ipswich, didn't he? And he played really well when he first came into the team. He's obviously a bit of a surprise packet for opposition and for us as supporters alike, because we hadn't really seen that much of him. And he did really well, but he got injured fairly early on, didn't he? He did his hamstring maybe was end of October, start of November. And while he sort of got fit again, got back in the team, he never got fit enough to have a run. So we actually don't know that much about Mundle as a player over a sustained period of time. As you say, he got back into the team, got back to some sort of fitness with the playoff run. I think he came on sub against Coventry, didn't he? Then he played in the final. And then if you remember during pre-season, there was rumours that he was going to leave. And there was rumours that he was going for talks with somebody. I can't remember which club it was. It was overseas, wasn't it? And then the next day, he broke down in training and he's only just come back from that injury now. So there's been a lot of murmurings in the background for quite a while about Mundle and whether he's going to stay or what. And obviously over the past week or so, there's been alleged interest, I think, from Rangers were credited with interest in him, weren't they? So, and then there was a story I kind of knocked on from that he wanted first team football. So whether they've given him a chance to say, right, you go and prove yourself, because look, you got Simon Adingra there who has done all right in patches and hasn't done that well in patches as well. He hasn't really hit the straps. You got Talby coming back from AFCON next week, so he'll be back in the squad, you'd presume. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that progresses over the next few weeks and whether we give him more minutes or whether he's kind of getting fit with the intention of the club loaning him out elsewhere to get more football when Talby comes back. And I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see another winger come back in, a new winger come in before the end of January. The other aspect to it is Diarra coming back. I suspect Lafayette will go over to the left anyway when Diarra comes back in. So you've got that bit to it. So in 2 or 3 weeks' time, Mundle could be third or fourth down the pecking order. So it's really one to watch. And it's a funny one, isn't it? Because as I said earlier, I think he's looked raw, but he's got good ability. He runs. He does a hell of a lot of work defensively. He carries the ball well, and he's a goal threat. He's not shy about getting the shot in. And I really like him as a player. Now, I was surprised. He came into a little bit of criticism after the game yesterday. And I was a little bit surprised by that because I actually thought he did well. I thought he played a really wholehearted game, and he was involved in a lot of our good attacking moves. So I thought he did well yesterday. I like him as a player.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But just when the game kicked off, Kieron, and I feel myself repeating myself about Sunderland actually in terms of the start in the game, because I felt we took control very quickly and we kind of dominated possession. And it does seem to be this pattern that we've got and it does seem to be like Regis Labris has identified very specific periods in the game where we take control, whether it's the start of the game, whether it's just after half time, where we almost try and catch the opposition cold. But we always seem to be in control at the same periods in games.
Yeah, I mean, I think whether it's reluctantly or not, there'll be many Premier League teams coming to the Stadium of Light who might resign themselves to the fact that certainly at some point in the opening period that Sunderland, aided and assisted by such a vociferous support, will start to take an initiative, start to play on the front foot. And obviously coming into the game, so much of the narrative was based around the fact that Sunderland were aiming to preserve their exceptional unbeaten home record, and they were up against a team that were winless in 9 and who were suffering from so much despair, despondency and disharmony, it seems. And, I think Granit Xhaka gave the ball away needlessly in the opening 10 minutes or so, which resulted in an opening being created for Crystal Palace. But, as the game sort of panned out, then it was perhaps becoming increasingly evident that there was a reason why Sunderland are unbeaten at home this season, and there's a reason why Crystal Palace are no longer the force that they were towards the end of last season and the beginning of this. They still have quality. It was still evident throughout the course of the first half. They obviously scored. Then Mateta had the goal disallowed. But it was once again another wonderful example of Sunderland digging in, the supporters staying with the team regardless of the fact that they were a goal behind. And and at this moment, and it's because there has been some concern about the lack of goals. I think what we've seen both last week at Everton in the Cup and yesterday at the Stadium of Light was the sort of technical qualities that Enzo Lafay has. He's presented with 2 different types of challenges, perhaps similar in distance, But if you want anybody in the Sunderland squad to show the necessary composure, to find the finesse and the precision to convert a chance, then it would be him. And to get the goal back, very quickly after conceding, settles a few nerves. And then, of course, by that stage, Sunderland are sort of well into it. And, they go on and score a wonderfully instinctive winning goal, and Brobbey has been a great addition. He's such a wonderful out for both midfielders and defenders that when the ball is played up to him, either into his feet or alongside him, he's got exceptional upper body strength and technique, to sort of at least provide some respite for others. And, he took that goal very, very well. And it's not the first time he's come up with such an important contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, Martin, Kieron brought it up. It was after 6 minutes when we were completely in control of the ball. Crystal Palace was sitting in, thinking, right, we're going to dig our trenches in here on the edge of the box and kind of just stay in our own half. And then Granit Xhaka played a completely blind pass that was quite casual, and they went through. Mateta went through on goal, and Roofs had to make a great save. And incidentally, it was Roof's 23rd birthday, and he was making his 23rd appearance for the club on the same day. But yeah, just in terms of Granit Xhaka, because look, let's face it, a 70% Granit Xhaka is probably better than 90% of most other players. But with just incidences like that, is there maybe a thought that comes in just to say, does he just need one game out? Does he just need a week off?
No. No, I think with Granit Xhaka, it just proves that he's human, doesn't it? Because it was a misplaced pass. It was a bit of a sloppy pass. But then, you fast forward to our goal and he puts a beautiful ball through to set that move going, doesn't he? So I just think it was a sign. We've had to wait a little while for a sign that he is human and not just a fantastically good football player. But yeah, look, I think that was just a mistake, wasn't it? And look, I think the way the Premier League fixtures are now, we're only competing in the Premier League and the FA Cup. We haven't this season. Might be a different story next season where we haven't got Europe to consider, anything like that. Granit Xhaka's played last Saturday. He's played this Saturday. And I think we've got then Saturday and then a week on Tuesday, haven't we? So there's actually lots of space in between the games. It's not as if we're asking to play Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. And yeah, I just think that was a very rare error from Xhaka. And personally, I wouldn't read much more into it.
Yeah, well, you ask a silly question and you get a perfectly sensible answer. That's the way it goes. But Kieron, just in terms of that first 15 minutes, because like I said, I thought we pinned Crystal Palace in without kind of really putting them under too much pressure. But is it a slight concern, or if we're talking about always areas to improve, the manager's going to keep saying that in those periods that maybe we don't create enough, because there was no real chance until just before Crystal Palace scored their opener.
Well, I suppose when you look at the goal return, you can look at it two ways. That over the course of the season, there may well be an argument that creating very, very good, clear-cut chances is certainly an area that can be improved upon. But equally, I think you can obviously point to the fact that Sunderland are relatively clinical. When a chance or an opening comes their way, at the very least, they're, for the most part, doing enough to ensure that they get something from the game. And to have gone through to January with, a loss record that is exceptional for any promoted side over the course of the Premier League, in its 33-year entirety, is testament to the resilience, to the ethos that has been carefully cultivated by Régis Lebris and others. So, yes, when you look at, it's sometimes hard, it's difficult to imagine that a team, in 8th or 9th can have a goal difference it's currently at 0. But even in the Championship, Millwall, who are currently 4th, have a goal difference that's -2. And what that points to is that this is a team that will often draw games or win games by the odd goal, but occasionally when they do suffer defeats, it might be by 2 or 3. And of course, Sunderland's 5 defeats have came courtesy of a 1-goal deficit at Fulham, 2 2-0s in Old Trafford and Burnley, and of course the 3-0s at Brentford and Manchester City. But if you'd offered anybody that at the start of the season, you would have gladfully taken it, because okay, it's been Wolves and West Ham that were the biggest losers on the day, as it were. But I mean, you can't win and get draws at times from as many games as Sunderland have and simply put it down to good fortune or small margins, because that's something that takes work and takes resilience, and it takes being prepared to go from the first minute to the last. And as much as that may sound cliched, you would be amazed at how many footballers do subscribe to the idea that the first 5 or 7 minutes are just for bedding in, or that once the 85-minute mark passes, that the game is going to finish as it is at that moment. And Sunderland players generally have been very, very good at this season, essentially saying, no, we'll be ready from the very first minute, and we will most certainly go, to coin a well-known phrase, till the end. And it served them exceptionally well. And, those are just 2 examples that exist within a culture, because you can't simply subscribe to those 2 and apply them without factoring in a whole host of other things that give the impression of a solidity, of a collective approach. You obviously wouldn't be aware, but yesterday, with the game at 1-1 at half-time, Crystal Palace emerged for the second half before the Sunderland team made their way onto the field. And Granit Xhaka was leading the team out for the second half. And 10 of the players were in the tunnel, and they were all ready just to run out. And of course, some teams do that. They'll go out in dribs and drabs for the second half. There isn't really any set formation in the way that you would expect in the first half. And Granit Xhaka turned round before he ran onto the pitch to make sure that all 11 players were ready to go out. And it was Noah Siddiqui that was that had still to emerge from the dressing room. I think as a person, he's maybe quite laid back. You wouldn't get that impression watching him. I know you say he came back from AFCON. I think he probably jogged back from AFCON. The only difference between Siddiqui and Reinildo is that Siddiqui might have jogged back. Reinildo probably sprinted back. But I suppose it's little things like that do, and of course this would be largely unseen to people. But of course, my vantage point in working for the Premier League is that within the tunnel area, you get to see little things that do point to little details. And they waited on Siddiqui, and then of course they made their way on, and they managed to secure the victory. So there's a whole host of things that combine to give you that, that work ethic, that ethos, that sense of togetherness. And, it says so far it's proven very fruitful.
Yeah, that's it. Well, just before we pull apart Crystal Palace's opener, I think that's a good time to take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
New year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery. Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
And welcome back to How We're the podcast. And we're just about to get into that opening goal. And actually, just a couple of minutes before, Martin, Trai Hume had a header from a corner from Enzo Lefebvre that maybe he should have done better with, and maybe we could have taken the lead. But then a couple of minutes later, there was a corner for Crystal Palace, and it was a bit chaotic. If I have to admit that it came in and Roofs kind of half cleared it with a punch, and it went to the back post. And from my point of view, when I saw the replay back, it felt like Hume and Enzo Lefebvre were almost leaving it to each other to sort out at that back post, and neither really reacted quick enough. And Pino got in, and to be fair, it was a brilliant little finish, if that's what he meant to do. I'm going to assume he did, that he meant to kind of poke it into the far corner. But it seemed like a really good controlled finish back into that top corner. So he still had a lot to do. But I just felt at that back post, we kind of let him off the hook a little bit.
Yeah, perhaps. I think, Roofs will probably look back on that and think he could have done a little more, done a little better. I think, as I say, Trai Hume, Enzo Lefebvre, a couple of other players around there, they'll probably look back on it and think they could have done a little bit better. But I think that sort of thing's going to apply to pretty much every goal he concedes, isn't it? I just thought it was a really good finish. And I think that's one of those ways, give the credit to the Palace attacker. I think in the pubcast that Gav and Ant and Sam did, they said that corner came from a free kick that shouldn't have been a free kick. And I can't remember what that was given for. But there might be that to chuck into the mix as well. But I just think it's one of those where I thought it was a really, really good finish. And, if it's not against your team, you're going, geez, that's a great goal.
Yeah, I completely agree with the lads about the free kick, but from my point of view, you still defend the corner properly. So
well, it's next phase of play, isn't it?
It's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
It's done with, isn't it? So,
I mean, if it was involved in that phase of play, if it was a bad penalty decision or something like that, then fair enough. But if you're talking about a free kick earlier, then you get the corner, you've still got plenty of time. But
I completely agree.
But in terms of going behind, Kieron, as we've already said, we've gone behind in 6 out of 11 Premier League games at the Stadium of Light. But what a response, just a couple of minutes later, we get the equaliser. And Dan Ballard, he did it quite a few times, especially in that first half, where he got the ball and drove us forward when he probably felt like we needed it. And he does that. He gives us that drive where he makes up 20, 30 yards and brings us up the pitch. And he did that, played it into Hume, and then Hume to Xhaka, and then Xhaka to Michele, who was doing that overlap on the right-hand side. But brilliant football in terms of creating that triangle on that right-hand side. And then Michele puts that cross across the box. And Brian Brobbey, brilliant awareness to let it run to Enzo Lefebvre. And as you've already touched on, a fantastic finish.
It was, it was actually quite encouraging and entertaining to see Dan Ballard reminiscent of a young Gary Bennett with his meandering runs through the middle. But I think with regards to the goal, I mean, to hit back so quickly was obviously very, very encouraging. You didn't want to leave any possibility for Crystal Palace to feel they could add to it. And I think when you're in a position on the wings where you're going to put in a ball, it's obviously very, very good if you can put it in a way that allows for a first-time finish. And I think if it's Mukiele that's delivered it, then if you've got someone with the technical quality and the confidence of Lefebvre running onto it, assisted by the awareness of a centre-forward, then you can be very confident where it's going to end up. And, quite often in a situation like that, the goalkeeper can be momentarily wrong-footed because they're following the line of the ball. So Henderson's moving naturally to his right, and then Lefebvre, to a small degree, can wrong-foot him. So, yeah, it was a very, very well-worked goal. I think regarding Palace's goal, if they're adopting the tactic at times from corners of, putting it in top of the goalkeeper, then it's obviously going to create difficulties. Even if it does get cleared, it can be problematic for a moment or two. My vantage point is very similar to what the managers would see as things are happening. So it was difficult to know if there was any significant quality attacks, but obviously I'll take your word for it. The only thing from where I was, it seemed to almost go in slow motion. You know, I didn't actually know it was going to end up in the corner of the net, but you then think about what was involved and you think, well, that must have been actually a very good finish. You know, if he's meant that to just loft it across the other side of the goal, then as Martin's touched upon, yes, we could spend all days nitpicking and probably find that somebody hasn't fulfilled the role that they were set. But I think on occasion, especially as an attacker myself, you're going to want some of the credit rather than trying to pin the blame on, you know, some defender or midfielder or forward who hasn't taken their set piece responsibilities to the letter.
Yeah. And go on,
sorry,
Mum.
Chris, just a couple of things with our goal. One, I think that goal doesn't happen if Trai Hume's not playing in that position that he was in, because Ballard's able to break, knowing that Trai Hume will drop back and cover. Mukiele's bombed forward, knowing that Trai Hume's there. And you know, if you had Talby or Traore or a more attack-minded player in that position, maybe one or both of those players don't have that freedom to go and break like that. So I think
that's what you call defensive instinct. I'm sure somebody mentioned this at the beginning of the pod.
that is defensive instinct, Kieran. I'll give you that one. But also the other point with it is the crowd is you know, if you cast your mind back to a few years ago, if we conceded the first goal in the game at the Stadium of Light, everyone's going, oh shit, here we go. We've got so used to this team now actually not being that bothered about conceding the goal, because it's okay, we'll go back and get it. And the crowd's bought into that now. The crowd's completely on side with that. So if we concede a goal like we did yesterday, the crowd just gets back behind the team again, which I think is hugely important in this season.
Absolutely is, Martin. You know, and I would rail against so many cliches in football, but the notion of the 12th man in the context of the men's game would be something that would be you know, with foundation. It undoubtedly has. And I think that the role that the support have played this season has been an integral part of such a long unbeaten record in the Premier League. I mean, I think the only time I can recall some murmurings of discontent was part of the way through the second half against Leeds. And I think it was fit. And, you know, and Sunderland weren't losing, but I think they weren't losing at the but obviously Leeds were very, very good for a large period of the second half. You know, and they'd Sunderland pinned back. But, you know, it almost very similar to what you're saying about Granit Xhaka. You know, the murmurings of discontent then, like Granit Xhaka's misplaced pass yesterday, are very much the exception to the rule of what we've seen over the course of the season. And if that continues, then I'm pretty certain that the fans and everyone connected with the club can be excited about what remains of the season.
Yeah, that's it. And actually, just Leeds were one of the more impressive sides I think I've seen at the stadium.
They were.
But Martin, just very quickly, I wanted to mention, just from a Crystal Palace point of view, because I thought Wharton was disappointing, Brennan Johnson was disappointing, but the last couple of minutes of the first half, Matete, just kind of showing how good he was, and I thought he probably the best Palace player on the pitch. But you know, just before half time, couple of things. He left Ballard kind of on his backside at one point, and then crossed, and they just missed a header, just wide. And then as Kieran's already touched on, the goal that was disallowed for offside, he was only just offside and then came back on. It was 3 against 1. He won the ball on his chest and just volleyed it from the edge of the box. But he looks a fantastic player.
Well, I was a little bit surprised that he was playing, because he's been linked with Juventus, hasn't he? And there was all sorts of talk about him going to Juventus. So I was a little surprised to see him in the lineup. But like he's the type of centre forward I love, because you can do like everything pretty well, can't he? He's strong, physical, he can hold it up. that I know he was offside, but the fact he was offside actually didn't give him any advantage in the strike. He produced
Yeah.
it.
It was
Brilliant.
I mean,
brilliant
from
strike.
where we were, and again, I appreciate the differences depending on your line of sight, but it didn't actually look as if it had went in the corner too much. It was just the sheer power that had taken
Ferocious,
it
yeah.
by Robin Roofs. And just to elaborate a little on what Martin said, we had been informed before the game that, of course, Mark Guehi would not be playing because he's en route to Manchester, that Mateta might not be featuring because there had been an element of discord because he does want to leave Crystal Palace to go to Juventus. But of course, they took to the field. They obviously felt that he's still willing to play his part. And I think from his contribution, not simply because of the disallowed effort, he showed up well, and you can see what he has to offer. You can see the problems that he's going to bring to any rear guard. I thought Dan Ballard would enjoy going up against players like that. I felt for Dan Ballard when he missed out going up against Haaland in the Man City game. But as much as Dan Ballard would embrace the opportunity of that physical confrontation, there's no doubt that Mateta can give it back and he can take it and he'll provide you with a whole host of problems. But I suppose that's, every single Premier League will be able to present you with difficulties. We saw it with Wolves for a large part of the second half before the calamitous own goal, concluded the contest. But again, whatever I said before, I think on the BBC, Sunderland had been presented with a whole host of different challenges over the course of the season. And they've risen to almost, not everyone, but almost everyone. And it hasn't always resulted in 3 points, but it has on a number of occasions. And on other occasions, it's meant they've managed to salvage a point. And I think Martin had spoken about the notion of moral victories in holding Liverpool and Spurs away, or Manchester City and Arsenal at home, coming back, of course, to beat Chelsea. So there's endless examples that would reinforce the argument that this is not something that can simply be put down to the odd occasion or another team, an opponent, having a bad day at the office, so to speak. Sunderland are giving them bad days at the office. After the Arsenal game, when Sunderland equalised in the last minutes, I was watching Mikel Arteta getting interviewed. And Mikel Arteta traditionally can be very prickly and abrasive when Arsenal don't win. And if you factor in then that they've conceded a last-minute equaliser, I feel for any interviewer who's going to speak to him within minutes of the full-time whistle. And yet, after the Arsenal game at the Stadium of Light, Mikel Arteta was quite gracious and he was very complimentary towards Sunderland and how challenging an opponent they had been. And I couldn't help but think that perhaps he's coming across in such a manner because he realises that no other team and none of Arsenal's primary competitors are going to have it easy when they come to the Stadium of Light. And of course, nobody has went away with anything more than what Arsenal have. So again, it's just another small example of, the sort of difficulties that Sunderland are presenting opposition sides with, notably at the stadium.
Yeah, and I'd be constantly agitated if my trousers were as tight as Arteta's, to be fair. But Martin, getting into the second half, because I thought the second half was completely different. Maybe partly because of what Kieron was describing, what was going on in the tunnel, and maybe that was part of it. That team talk at half time. But 10 minutes into the second half, I thought there was a big incident that kind of got waved away quite quickly. Michele across to the back post. And Mundle was just completely taken out at the back post. And the referee waved it away. And then VAR quickly dismissed it. And I thought, how can they not take more of a look at that?
Now, like, to me, I try not to be biased with this sort of stuff. That was 100% the penalty. Like, I could not believe, even when the referee didn't give it, I'm like, how on earth have you missed that? But I was sat there going, VAR, I'll give that. Because it looked so obvious on first viewing. And on the replay, it looked even more obvious. It was like, to me, that's a stone wall penalty. But nobody really seemed to, even the players didn't seem to kind of get stuck in it, did
the
they?
fans shouted for it, but it didn't seem to be a reaction on the pitch.
But you've mentioned the referee, Chris. You've opened that can of worms, and once again, didn't cover himself in glory, did he?
Well, that was my segue into it, because Kieron, I was going to raise, because obviously you were on the touchline, and there was that penalty shout, but also I wanted to mention that constant battle that Brian Brobbey was having up front. Now, I think this is something that we're going to see every week, because yes, okay, defenders are all over Brian Brobbey, but I think the fact that he ripped a Crystal Palace's player's shirt completely off his chest at one point shows that all of the time Brian Brobbey has actually got hold of the Crystal Palace's player's shirt. So referees see it as 6 and 2 threes rather than a defender being all over him.
They do, and for the life of me, I mean, there may be one or two situations where you could justify the forward holding the shirt of a defender if the defender's doing likewise. But for the most part, I can't understand why a centre forward would want to be as close to a defender as possible. Because apart from anything, even when you're in such close proximity, the idea would be to roll them. And of course, at some point, you're going to have to let go of or remove all contact. And of course, it's such an important part of Brian Brobbey's game. And there's nothing wrong with, in fact, it's such a great outlet to have that target man that can play with his back to goal, because it's a skill in itself. And there's players who are 6 foot plus, 13 stone plus, but who don't give you the impression that they're willing to take it in and face the consequences from what comes from behind. You go back to guys like Connor Wickham, maybe like 6'4", built in a way that would be the envy of many men, but yet in their mind, it's almost as if they're 5'8". And Brian Brobbey's got the physique, but he's also got the mentality to match. And he'll cause people endless problems. But of course, the downside is that at times the conclusion might be that it's him that's been the instigator, or it's him it's him that maybe gets caught just at the moment that the referee's getting the best vantage point to see who might be more culpable. But all things considered, you would take it, because if it falls down in a 50-50 sense that some free kicks go for you and some go against you, then the ones that you get are going to be further up the field, and you can obviously hope to capitalise. I've not seen the penalty incident back, but at the time, I've seen Romine Mundle going over, and occasionally, of course, they might not call the referee to go over and have a look at it, because they themselves might come to the conclusion that in this occasion, there isn't anything really that's worth exploring further. I don't want to, I would never ever want to single anyone out, but I do believe we are in a period within the game where a lot of managers, a lot of players are encouraging others to go down. Now, all of a sudden, I've seen Romine Mundle go over, and there had undoubtedly been a coming together of players. And that, of course, prompts you to think, oh, surely that's going to get looked at. But I think sometimes you maybe just have to trust the judgment of the people who are going to look at it. You can maybe say it was done very, very quickly. That it might have been worth a little bit more of a look at it, because it certainly, even us at the sidelines, and what you have then is you have people like Glasner going back to his technical staff who have got the video set up and saying, was that dubious? Did that look like a penalty? And then he would be doing the same when Palace are on the attack and saying, was that a foul and things like that. You didn't have these things when I was, playing. We had to wait until the Tuesday and go and watch a Betamax video that was really grainy. So the wonders of technology. But I know, if you think back to the League One, and the 4 years spent there and the 3 in the Championship, one of the most common chants that was heard at the Stadium of Light wasn't celebrating the contributions of Sunderland players as such. It was the abuse directed towards a match official who was frequently told that he's not fit to referee. And I think, of course, Sunderland are now well accustomed to VAR. They were beneficiaries of it at Wembley because Sheffield United could have went 2 up from memory. And I wouldn't be necessarily a fan of VAR, but I would defend the reasons why it's in the game, and obviously suggest that the alternatives would be that in its absence doesn't mean that decisions are going to be any better for you, or certainly they won't be the right decisions that would be reached. But I would need to see the Romine Mundle incident back before you can maybe... you see, and it's used to blame, because I had to go to bed early last night to get up for this, so I couldn't watch Match of the Day. There you go.
Well, I'll put the apologies out straight away. Well, I was going to say...
if you want to have a podcast about 3 hours, when I do my cross trainer, as you know I religiously do on a Sunday, I'll watch Match of the Day on iPlayer, and then I'll report back with my findings on Mundle.
Well, for a start, I was going to say it used to be grainy images on Betamax, and now it's grainy images on YouTube, isn't it? Because they're almost in black and white there. But yeah, just very quickly though, Kieron, did you feel frustration from both sides about the referee on the sidelines?
The thing is, Chris, having done the job that I do now for the last 9 years, what the referee, and particularly what the fourth official are subjected to, is hard to believe. It truly is. And it's a lot of the clubs, they do have a designated member of staff whose job, in part, it is to go and remonstrate with the fourth official for the most part, occasionally the assistant referee, and very, very occasionally it may well be the referee, about decisions. And of course, VAR doesn't cover anything, so some teams will be on the wrong end of decisions that result in fouls or free kicks, the type of things that aren't covered by VAR. And I think your instinct, like a supporter, is that that's a foul for our team, or that shouldn't be a foul against us, And again, like you two are speaking about the possibility of a wrong decision in the build-up to Crystal Palace's corner. And, for all Reggie Lebris and Oliver Glasner are very, very experienced managers, they only have 2 eyes, and their eyesight, as far as I know, isn't any better than mine or yours. So if they're shouting for a foul for or a foul against within a millisecond of an incident, it's their bias that's coming to the surface. And of course, it's understandable. But the Mundle incident, the Crystal Palace incident that led to the corner, I've not seen back. And of course, it's so difficult to be definitive about any unless it's unbelievably obvious. If you were in the clock stand paddock the night Sunderland played Coventry, and you happen to be positioned very, very close to a certain David Speedy, I think you could probably deduce that Gary was perhaps a little bit excessive in his reaction. But that's a rarity. For the most part, we're shouting from 10, 20, 30, 50 yards away. And it's our emotional tribalism and attachment to our club that is the guiding force. But when I watch the highlights from the Stadium of Light and various others in the next hour or so, you're obviously in a better position to see it back. It's strange, isn't it? When managers do post-match interviews, within minutes of the game finishing, they seem to know very, very well and have an expert opinion on the decisions that should have went in their favour. But when they're asked about the ones that might have been beneficial for them, it's, well, I'll need to see it back. I've not had time to look at it as yet. But there you go. That's the prerogative.
Yeah. I tell you who would have been happy yesterday with that incident with Brobbey and the central defender and his shirt got ripped. Hummel. Because their shirts stood up to an awful lot, didn't they? The Palace shirt manufacturer didn't come out with it looking too good, did they?
Just completely ripped it up.
But for Lacroix, I don't know if Lacroix was wearing one of those things underneath the strip. Whoever makes that might have been happy.
That's right.
Well, going back to Gary Bennett, I think the referee was a bit harsh on him, if you ask me. But there you go. And actually, incidentally, I think it was the 36th anniversary the other day of that actually happening, of that incident.
January. That's right.
Yeah. So I think it was the 36th anniversary of that, something like that. Anyway. But yeah, just let's go on to the goal, because look, it was coming, Martin. It was an attack against defence, I think, for 5 minutes before that, and it was kind of building up to it. And then in the end, Alderete put the ball into Siddiqui, and you know, we've missed a lot of things about Siddiqui, don't get me wrong, but this is one of them where he just turns a player, drives forward, and then he played it into Brian Brobbey, but who still had a lot to do, kind of on the angle, but lifted the ball up in off the bar. Always looks more spectacular when it, you know, if you can get a goal in off the bar, that's what you decide to do, don't you? Because it just looks better, doesn't it? The old Tony Yeboah rule. But yeah, great goal and deserved for Brian Brobbey. I mean, he did not put a shift in and then collapsed with cramp.
He did, didn't he? Look, I thought Brian Brobbey was excellent yesterday. I think he held the ball up really well, and I understand the point about him grabbing players' shirts and, you know, whether there isn't a need for it really. And I think he creates that in the referee's mind that he might have fouled, or it might be 50-50 where it might not be quite as even. But he worked hard all afternoon. He held the ball up really well. And you can see his progression over the past few months, can't you? You know, he was coming on sub and looked a bit unfit. He was blown out of his arse on a couple of occasions after being on for 10 minutes, wasn't he? He was still powering through in the second half yesterday. He was doing a load of donkey work. And you know, I feel a bit sorry for him to some extent, because he's not getting many chances to have a shot on goal, is he? We're not creating that many chances for him. But his run, so Siddiqui's part in the goal was fantastic. And we have missed that bit from our midfield when he's been absent. And he drove forward, brilliant. Brobbey's run in the box, I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but he makes a beautiful dart and run, perfectly timed. Siddiqui obviously finds him. I think it takes a little deflection. But then he almost goes through with his wrong foot, doesn't he? You'd expect him to have a go with his left, but he kind of curls his right foot round it and gets in. You know, Brobbey said, I didn't know where it was going. I just wanted to kind of guide it in that direction, and obviously hit the bar, and it looks great. But all credit to him, because he's kept going and going and going, and it'd be a difficult job in that Sunderland team. And like Wilson Isidore's had the same, hasn't he, where he's worked so hard for 90 minutes and not got a great deal of opportunity, not got much of the ball. But I think the more that Brobbey plays, the more you can kind of see that we're building passages of play with him in mind. You're playing the ball at his feet. He can hold it up for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 seconds at Chelsea, can't he? And it enables players to get close to him, and then you can kind of develop that play from there. And I think that adds an awful lot to our game, rather than when Isidore's up front, because he's on his bike, isn't he, trying to get over the top. Yeah. So I thought it was a really well-deserved goal. I thought Brobbey was my man of the match. I thought he was absolutely superb. And you mentioned Alderete at the start of that segment, Chris. I just wanted to point out Alderete's cross with the outside of his left foot in the first half was one of the highlights of the season for me. If that had gone onto somebody's head and we'd gone 1-0 up with that would have been perfection, wouldn't it? But no, look, it was brilliant. And I think we deserved. I thought in the second half we were by far the better side, although we hadn't actually created that many chances. I think we created a few more chances once we went 2-1 up, didn't we? We had a few other attempts on goal. We hadn't quite got in the position to really go for it. There's a few opportunities where you might have wanted somebody to have a potch off the edge of the box. We were patient. We were trying to build the moves up. And yeah, we eventually got our just rewards. I thought we really did deserve it.
Yeah, that's it. And just on Brian Brobbey, Kieron, because I remember Martin Yule said in the summer that, he was kind of praising Sunderland's business, the fact that we got someone who was out of form probably for half the price of what he was worth. And he's kind of shown it now. He just, every time he takes the pitch, he looks better and better.
He does. And, it might be on his physique or lack of game time, but it has taken him a little bit of time. And they were thinking about making a change. I don't know if it was immediately after the goal, but obviously there was signs that he was impaired, whether it was cramp or not. But obviously they'd kept him on, and it's just a gradual case because he could, you can put someone on the field and keep them on for 90 minutes, but they might not be at their optimum. They might not be at the level that you really want them to be at. But he's certainly gradually getting there. And he's one of those centre forwards that, and there would be a few, but maybe not that many, that can make such a significant contribution to the output of the team, even if they don't end up on the score sheet. Because it can be such a wonderful respite for the other players to have somebody that, as Martin says, can take the ball in and can keep it there for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and allow people to come in and around them, and then to sort of build up play, and just really to expand upon, like the idea of the second half yesterday. And again, what's been a hallmark of the season is that even on the occasions where Sunderland aren't creating a lot of clear-cut chances, they became very, very adept at wearing teams down. And when they do create an opening, they're able to capitalise. And regarding whether it's Brobbey's goal or Alderetti's cross yesterday, because the one thing they have in common is that there's an argument that both could have been taken with the other foot. I think that the way Alderetti was facing was that you could probably just about justify taking a cross with your stronger foot, albeit with the outside of the foot. Of course, you don't expect to see it from centre backs. That was things like that were my forte. Not. But then again, this is a cultured South American centre back. But the thing about Brobbey's finish, certainly from where I've seen it, was Martin's right to say that there may well be a coaching manual that says wait a 20th, a 10th or 5th of a second longer and take it with the other foot. But Dean Henderson maybe saves it if Brian Brobbey doesn't take it as quickly as he does. The way he just flicks his foot out. Because I think he probably catches him a little bit unawares. And although he makes an attempt to get it, it's obviously not enough to stop it going in. And of course it went in off the underside of the bar, because the last time we beat Palace, mines went off the underside of the bar. That's the way we do these things against them.
Yeah, but that was Brian Atkinson's pass. You didn't have to do much with it, really. But
that's correct. Yes.
Waited perfectly in the North Sea wind. But anyway, I was gonna say, actually, because you talked about cultured South American defenders. I can't remember Emerson Thome crossing the ball with the outside of his foot. But anyway, just in the closing stages, Martin, look, in that 20 minutes, I never felt threatened by Crystal Palace at all. I thought we managed the game absolutely brilliant. And because it's becoming routine, Martin, some of these results against some of these teams, it's easy to forget that, especially that performance in that second half. Palace are no mugs, and we really made the game look comfortable in that second half.
No, we did, and I thought it was interesting that they didn't make any subs, did they? And then afterwards, Glasson had talked about the lack of support, the lack of backing, the lack of depth he's got. And I think that was actually a statement rather than a need. You got the lad, Uche, who played with Alderete at Getafe last season. He came on sub against us down there and he was absolutely superb. But they don't want to play him because it'll trigger a permanent transfer. So you've got this bit bubbling under as well. He could have made a difference yesterday, I think.
It was
strange, wasn't it? You don't see it very often.
Martin. And, the comments of Glasner pre-match are in complete contrast to his remarks after the game. And I'm always at pains to point out to supporters that you should never, ever take too much from what you hear from managers or players while they're in the employ of a club, because they will tend to emerge with everything's fine behind the scenes. We're working hard. We're trying to redouble our efforts to do things properly. But I think the truer feelings of Oliver Glasner came to the surface after the game yesterday. And there's no doubt that it's a club that is going through a particularly challenging period. And for whatever reason, he's obviously decided to sever ties at the end of the season. But, it's very, very rare, because part of the job I do, it revolves around being vigilant for substitutions and changes and why they might come about, and relaying a lot of this back. But not only did they not make any substitutions, there wasn't even any signs. The players were going out and getting warmed up in a very generic manner.
Yeah.
But at no point were they telling any one individual to go out and get warmed up with the intention of coming on quite soon. And I mean, coincidentally, it took Sunderland a long time to make their first change as well. And in all my time doing it, it's monumentally rare to get to the 80th minute or so with no substitutions from either side. But obviously it's for different reasons. And I think Glasner has said that because they're a little bit depleted, obviously Guehi has left the club or is in the process of doing so, that he didn't feel that confident that any of the potential changes could have been to Crystal Palace's advantage. And I know some people might say, well, Sunderland got them at a good time. And yeah, you can argue that. But let's not forget, when Sunderland went to Crystal Palace earlier in the season, they couldn't have picked a worse time to play against a Palace side that was in very, very good form, had drawn at Chelsea in the opening day, were FA Cup winners. So you just need to play the hand that you're dealt at any given time.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's 7 without a win, I think, in the Premier League for Crystal Palace. But just on to the next couple, Kieron, before we finish off, because that was the first of a run of 3 games where we play sides either in a bad run or in a bad position in the Premier League. Of course, we had Palace and then West Ham away, then Burnley at home. But we got off to a good start in that 3 run of games, because I think the expectation was quite high for these 3 games.
Well, it would be, and understandably so, albeit the game against West Ham is in London and they'll be buoyed by their success yesterday against Spurs, but there's still a fragility there, and it might even be more evident at home, when they play home fixtures. So you just don't know what to expect from West Ham. They're obviously very much up against it. Even if they do claw points back, you still think it's going to be a relegation fight for them as we get into March and April and perhaps May. But like any side, as we've seen in the opening day of the season, sometimes it can be the small margins that are so critical in deciding the outcome of the game. They've got Jared Bowen, they've got various others that can undoubtedly cause problems, but they will not be looking forward to coming up against Sunderland, and I don't think Manchester City or Arsenal, Liverpool, etc. will be looking forward to, not Man City, but Arsenal in the remaining fixtures, because there's just that sense of fortitude and resilience and a sense of annoyance to play against. I mean, I watched Ryan Cherky. I watched him in the opening stages of the game at the Stadium of Light on New Year's Day. And it was a particularly cold evening. And that in itself was probably off-putting to him, but he didn't like the attention that Sirkin was giving him, up without fouling him. He was just up close and handsy and in his face and all around him. And things like that mean that if you divide the outfield into 20, so you've got the application in a physical sense from 10 players and the application from the 10 players in a mental sense. Look, Ryan Cherky looked as if mentally he wasn't where Guardiola would want him to be. So that's you gradually chipping away at what can come from a very, very, very good player and a very, very good team. And when you go to West Ham on Saturday, I think it's fair to assume that some of those West Ham players, given what the season has produced today, are probably not where they would ideally want to be in terms of that mentality and preparedness to go and fight and win. And it may well be that Burnley at home might be a more challenging fixture in some respects than West Ham away. And I'm not saying that because, believe it or not, the teams that Sunderland have laboured against this season have been their two fellow promoted sides.
Yeah.
But Burnley showed yesterday that they can compete, and they've lost a lot of games by the odd goal. So Scott Parker might be frustrated that they're just not, there may be lapsing at times, or concentration levels, or final third quality, etc. There's no easy games, of course, in the Premier League.
Yeah,
but every single team has found out so far this season there's no such thing as an easy game against Sunderland.
Yeah, absolutely. And with just being 3 points outside of the Champions League places, I think we can maybe keep on getting carried away. But I think that's a great place to finish us on today, because Kieron is itching to get on that cross trainer. I can see it in his face. He can't wait for that. So I think that's a good place to leave it.
I can't believe I do things like this for nothing when I used to hate it when I was getting paid. I mean, it's incomprehensible, but it's my new regime of personal discipline.
Well, it's talking to us just to avoid it for another hour or whatever. But an absolute pleasure, Kieron. Great to catch up, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
good
cheers,
stuff,
Kieron.
Mate. And Martin, thank you very much. Great to catch up, mate.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again, sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know. The rare occasion might happen. But thanks again, Martin. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more analysis on the Rugger Report website of the game against Crystal Palace. And we'll have loads more pods, one every day, of course, this week, as usual, to reflect on the win over Palace and to look forward to West Ham. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.